Hey guys, this is Joe East here. I decided for Veterans Day to do a little clip on some current issues, a little bit of perhaps expanding some ideas of where we should be going in the future. Anyway, Veterans Day sermon I wrote as kind of a half joke, right? So what happened in the midterm elections? Let's put this all in perspective because diehard Democrats and diehard Republicans are typically crazy people when it comes to politics. You've got to be pretty crazy to actually be a diehard Democrat or Republican because the propaganda pieces of the networks and propaganda machines of the various parties to get people out to vote or to get people stirred up so they can sell advertisement is tuned into a very scientific high level of hypnosis and rabble rousing and a bit of insanity, which causes the diehards to be a bit weird and crazy. So I'm actually an independent, and so I don't care about any of the extreme sort of stuff. So what I'm concerned with mainly is the balance of power. So you have to, in most healthy societies since perhaps the 1500s, you want to look for balances of power. So in the three branches of government we have in the U.S. and in many other Western nations, and copied and pasted to a lot of the Eastern nations, you have the legislative, the executive, and a judicial trying to balance each other out. Every once in a while, one gets the upper hand or the other one beats the crap out of the other one or whatever. But as long as you got a good fight going on within the government, things can more or less work themselves out in time, even though maybe temporarily you might have something that's a bit strange, a bit not wanted, perhaps. But let's take a look at this Trump phenomenon and the crazy Republicans and the crazy Democrats, should I say the extremists, or those of you who are diehard partisans. Back in 2016, what Trump did, let's first of all, let's say what Trump is. He's actually a Union Democrat. Trump is not a Republican. He is pretty much not even a Democrat. But if you want to look at a traditional political alliances, what is he? He's a Union Democrat, straight down the line. Protectionism, the working man, getting the economy running so people can go to work in the factories, right? Bring the factories back to the U.S. So it's maybe allied with the middle to lower middle class, but it's definitely a working class union sort of thing. The problem with the Democrats is that they kicked, or should I say pushed out a lot of the union, traditional union guys out in the past, say, 20 or so years. But Trump is right in the center of a Union Democrat as far as politics, which is kind of funny because he ran on the Republican ticket. He used to be a registered Democrat, and he switched to Republican because why? Well, he can probably get most of the working class who actually votes with the Republican base. So that's why he went to the Republican Party and used that as his base, because the working class was just no longer part of the Democrat Party at this time right now, whereas it was traditionally. So what did he do? He joined the Republican Party and he beat the crap out of the Republican establishment with his superior persuasion skills. He's a businessman and he's a billionaire, but he's lost billions before. So he's a big time player as far as leadership and the ability to run an organization. So he's more skilled than any bureaucrat in the government, or 20 to a million times more skilled than any politician out there or any judge. There's nobody who can touch him in politics because his experience is just way above the level of any of these clowns in the government or in politics, because running his bigness of organization and beating the crap out of billionaires in business deals and negotiating with billionaires is just a higher level game to play than any of the goofy politicians that are out there or the bureaucrats in the government. So basically Trump is playing against amateurs. And anybody who thinks he's not a pro at what he does is actually part of the freaky partisan game. You know, you've been hypnotized by the media to be a partisan if you think he's some sort of amateur. He's a professional, and he knows exactly what he's doing. So he beat the crap out of the traditional Republicans, which is kind of funny, him being a Union Democrat. So he got rid of what was used to be called the Rhinos, Republican in name only is kind of what it used to be called over the past, say, 10, 15, 20 years. So he got the nomination there, so he beat the crap out of the Democrats in the general election because Hillary, although she is touted as a Democrat, she's actually more of a neocon, a warmonger, kind of like George Bush was. So George W. Bush and pretty much all the Bushes. So the Bushes, George W. Bush and Hillary Clinton, same politics internationally. Just blow up a bunch of people in the Middle East, elsewhere, Afghanistan or whatever, and keep the war machine going so the defense contractors are happy and a lot of the businesses that feed the defense contractors are happy. The government guys are happy and some of the deep state stuff. And, of course, no shrinking of the welfare state, so you get both ends of the political spectrum. So the Bush regime and the Clinton regime and the potential Hillary regime that would have came forth would have did nothing different than the Bush regime or perhaps the Obama regime. So if you guys recall the Obama regime, his primary mandate was to end the wars. He tried his best, but it was ultimately a failure. Wars didn't stop because the government, bureaucrats, infrastructure, and the military-industrial complex is just way too powerful for any one president. Unless you come in there with skills where you can actually beat the bureaucracy and beat the status quo of the deep state. So Trump is probably trying to do something like that. He probably won't be successful ultimately, but what he might do that would help is just shake things up to where people kind of sort of know what's going on. And they know what game is being played. Who knows if it's all going to be destroyed completely and rebuilt, or if he really has an end game in play, what happens after he destroys the deep state or whatever. Or is he a piece of the deep state, the one faction of the deep state beating the crap out of another faction of the deep state? So that's all up in the air as to how that's going to pan out in the future. So basically, Trump came in, billionaire, extremely talented guy, backed by other billionaires. He's, like I said, 100 times more talented than any of the politicians out there and 100 times more talented than any of the bureaucrats. So basically, he's coming in supported as a faction of billionaires, one faction of billionaires, perhaps part of the military-industrial complex. So that's kind of where we're at as far as the political balance of power. So what happened was for a couple of years, he was playing around with Republican House and a Democrat House. So he had a lot of support, but what happens to the Democrats whenever they're on the defensive? Well, they fight extremely hard and vicious. So you saw this crazy stuff about investigations, the Mueller thing, the Russia investigation, whatever. All that is just an extremism from a party that's not in power, that's attempting to get a hold of the media narrative so they can get stuff done. So it's kind of like drama, creating an extreme amount of drama because you don't have as much power as the other side to get your voice heard, etc. So you're going to see tampering down of some of the more extremist elements and claims of the Democrats and or the left in the next couple of years because they have a little bit of power in the House. It'll be attenuated. You probably see the crazy, weird, guys on the fringes causing trouble, but they probably won't be taking this seriously because probably Pelosi's going to be in power or whoever gets voted Speaker of the House, have a voice with all the Democrats behind him in the House. So it's a balancing of power. However, Trump still has a Senate, so he's in full control of the Supreme Court. So all Supreme Court nominees for the next 2 years, Trump has them all pretty much wrapped up. And so he has power, long-term strategic power by keeping the Senate in this particular cycle. And that way he has effect over the Supreme Court for the next generation or even two, because if there's plenty of appointments to the Supreme Court, he's going to have a lot of power over that process. And it looks like that was a very hard loss for the Democrats whenever they couldn't get in control of the Senate. So that means they lost a big power base there from the Supreme Court. A lot of the government bureaucrats and the professional politicians on the left use a lot of the power of the courts to push their power through the American political system, because sometimes it's hard to get votes for what they want to do, right? So, but that's just the current political situation. I mean, it's we have a system that's based on balance of power. So, yeah, you might be unhappy for a year or two or whatever, and things might kind of get, uncomfortable a little while, but then they correct themselves, because our system's based on balance of power. I mean, there's more than three. I mean, there's three official branches of government, but there's other factions playing in the political system that kind of balance things out. You get federal, state, Democrats versus Republicans, all fighting each other, which is good. We want them to always be fighting, because if they're not fighting, that means they're all together and they're all, oppressing the people if they're not fighting against each other. So, which is good. And it's good that we have factions of the deep state fighting each other. So the theory now is that the previous deep state of bureaucrats, military-industrial complex that was, fostering all of these overseas adventures in the Levant elsewhere, now have a counterbalance, which backing Trump. But there's, of course, some issues there. Some of those might be warmongers also. But at least they're fighting each other, and a healthy fight is good for the balance of power, right? So the politics is no big deal. I mean, it's as long as your money is stable and nobody's stealing money at your bank accounts, you don't see gangs of armed people attacking your neighborhood and blowing your houses up. I mean, you're fine, right? I mean, you see a bunch of crap on TV, but most of the stuff on television is not true. It's just a lie. Theater. I mean, Hollywood can manufacture any sort of theater. The news can too, right? And why wouldn't they, right? To control the narrative. So to control the narrative, they'll make up all kind of crap. Whether it's a story or an event or whatever, everything is manufactured for drama, for affecting policy, affecting agenda. So don't believe anything in the news. So news is, just look at it as entertainment. It's not real. None of it's real. Trump realizes that, and he plays with it just to play with the narrative, just to steer the narrative to his way of his interest or his agenda, right? Which is what politicians should do. So they're just steering the narrative to their agenda. None of it's true. It's all BS, right? So don't take any of the news seriously. Whether it's the bigger the event in the news, the more likely it's bullcrap. 99% of the news never happened, ever. In fact, history. You study history, eventually you get to a point where you find out that most things never happened. 99% of the shit you study in history is bullcrap. It either never happened, or what happened was completely different than what you were explaining. And that goes for everything. All the wars of the 20th century, all the big events of the 20th century, the 21st century, it's all bullcrap. None of it's true. What actually happened is completely different than what's claimed. So don't worry about it. It's no big deal. Live your life. Have fun. Are you happy? If you're happy, you're good, right? If you're unhappy, try to get happy. Don't worry about the news. Don't worry about politics that much unless you're a professional politician, because things are much better than what the news says. Because when you're into propaganda, and I'm in sales, so I know how to psychologically manipulate people if I were so inclined. But anyway, the easiest button to press to persuade people, to hypnotize people, is fear. It's the easiest button to press. So what do? In these propaganda networks? They press the button of fear. And fear is the easiest way to get people to subscribe to your agenda. It's easy. Very easy. Kids, what's the easiest thing to do whenever we discipline our kids? Fear, right? Spanking, the belt, yelling, wherever. That's the easy button. Long term, that's not right. Long term, it's going to come blow back at you. They're going to hate you when they're adults. But short term, the fear button's easy to press, and it works, right? So in the same way as we raise our kids, perhaps, think about, instead of using fear, use something else. Fear is not good, right? So anyway, don't pay attention to this fear crap. It's bullshit, right? So let's go on away from politics, which is mostly bullshit, manipulation of emotions, mainly fear. Let's go to what's really happening. So the major problems that we've faced for thousands of years have been solved. We all have plenty of food. Well, you might not have perfect nutrition in some cases, but we have all the food we need. We have all the transportation we need. We can get from coast to coast, jumping on a plane for a few $100s. we're good. Communications, we solved that issue with the internet. Everybody's connected. Everybody's connected. So we solved the issue of food, transportation, communications. That's all solved. The only things left um, in the medical field, all infectious diseases have been, pretty much done away with. The only thing left is now that we're living to an older age, now that all the infectious diseases have been conquered, we're seeing, we got to conquer things that are a symptom of being an older society. We live old enough to get cancer. We live old enough to get heart disease. We live old enough to get, prostate cancer. Most guys are probably going to get it when they hit 70 or 65. And we're old enough to get those diseases now. So most things have been solved on the medical end. So we're not doing too bad. If you're unhappy and you got serious medical issues, then of course you might not feel like you're part of the rest of humanity that's actually feeling good. But for the most part, we've solved all our problems. That's it. But there's a downside to solving all of our problems, because, as you guys recall, Karl Marx, or perhaps Marxism, one of the main criticisms of capitalism is the last man. So once all our problems are solved, then we don't have no conflict, right? If we have no conflict, then we have no heroes, all right? And it seems like the human psyche has some necessary thing about it where we need to go through an odyssey and need to go through some sort of great battle, some great heart-wrenching experience, so we can build our character and become a whole person. You got to go through the several gates of life, right? And usually that's a big battle between yourself and others, sometimes yourself and nature, yourself and anything, right? So I think the reason why we might feel like things are not going as good as they actually are is because this inner need for conflict, heroes in our odyssey, right? So we start inventing bullcrap in politics, and they invent fear, and our brains kind of hook into that and join in the fear because we're tuned to have conflict, to become a hero, to have our odyssey. So look out for that in your own psychology. So if you're an extreme partisan, just think about this. I mean, what are you scared of? What do you have to fear? Is it real? Was it manufactured by the propaganda networks? Was it manufactured by the politicians to make you scared? Think about that. So I guess, Veterans Day, the veterans are the heroes, go out and fight the enemy and potentially put your life on the line. But we don't have any grand wars like the World War I and World War II stuff where you're sending hordes of infantry into machine gun fire, or should you say hordes of infantry into artillery. You don't have that happening anymore. So now the wars are fought with specialist teams going after other specialist teams, right? So this massive warfare that happened in the 20th century is a thing of the past. It's obsolete. I mean, anybody fielding a mass army is just stupid because nuclear weapons can wipe them out really quick if you mass any army at any one point now. So you can't have masses of infantry at any one point because they're vulnerable to extermination. So it's like we solved that problem. So the veterans thing where, you're a hero going out there in a battlefield fighting, it's mostly specialist teams now, small teams of specialists, mostly Navy SEALs, Rangers. Yeah, we still have the Army, but there's not much need of a massive Army where you got a bunch of heroes like World War II or World War I, or even Vietnam. There wasn't much of a massive infantry in that war as far as pitched battles, but there was a good bit of infantry. You got 57,000 guys got killed. So it looks like the mass warfare and the mass heroes and the conflicts is gone away. So we're gonna have some heroes, but we won't see much of them because it's a small number. So we need to replace this conflict hero sort of archetype that we've traditionally, been, go out and fight for your country sort of thing, with something else. And that something else is probably unknown. I mean, we can propose a few things like sports, go out there and fight nature, fight yourself, try to run marathons, try to lift heavier weights, try to, do those things and compete non-combat. But is it enough of a conflict to make heroes to where we sense in our souls that we're going through an odyssey? So that's the issue that we're dealing with. And it's actually a good problem, right? So think about a worse problem. Let's say we were dealing with starvation. Let's say we were dealing with mass warfare and the threat of extermination, right? Which we're not dealing with anymore. So it's a good problem to have where there's no major conflicts, so therefore there won't be any major heroes. And our odysseys are more personal. It's not collective as it was. Major warfare events from the Napoleonic Wars all the way down to, say, Vietnam or World War II, even the War on Terror. So we got to think about how good we have it now, and that our fear that we might have is manufactured from the propaganda networks. And of course, our brain wants to fear stuff because we really have a need to go through conflict and produce heroes and go through our odysseys, right? So just think about your psychology if you operate on fear, if you're scared, based on the reportings in the so-called news networks, propaganda networks, the crazy politicians who are going to lie all the time. That's their job. Lie and manipulate you for pushing their agenda. So we're doing pretty good. Like I said, no major warfare, no major disease. We've solved the major disease conflicts of the past. So we need to find other demons and other devils to fight out there. And it's not easy because there's not that many left, right? I mean, maybe there's a war on cancer. Maybe there's a war on heart disease, perhaps a war on better nutrition, cleaner water. But these infectious diseases of the past, they're gone. They're gone. We have easy problems now compared to history. So that's where we're headed now. And so it's a good thing to be hopeful for. We don't have to worry as much as our ancestors did about survival and annihilation and et cetera, all that stuff, right? So we can kick back and be more creative and create the new world, create whatever's in our imagination, be creative, build new things, build a better society. You see where I'm headed? There's this New Jerusalem, perhaps we want to build of the biblical lore, Book of Revelation, build a New Jerusalem, streets of gold. Why not, right? So if we solved all our problems, start mining gold and just paving streets of gold, right? So I guess what a so-called sermon I'm saying here is a lot of hope, right? So there's not much need for anxiety and fear unless you have health problems, right? I mean, some of you guys have health issues, but I'm talking about in general, society in general. There's not much need for anxiety and fear anymore. So that's my conclusion from the past few years in politics. Those of us who might have spent too much time in politics, you get out and you figure out it's a mental game. And if you want to succeed, you got to win the mental game. And some of that mental game is in the heart. So perhaps it's bringing stuff out of the head and paying attention to what's right here. More. So that's my Veterans Day sermon. Cheers to all the heroes out there who actually put your life on the line in the past in all these crazy wars, whether they're justified or not, it doesn't matter. You did a job that most of us either can't do or are not skilled enough to do. Some might not be willing to do. So yeah, cheers to all the veterans. I mean, you guys are some badasses, right? So take care of yourselves, live a long life, have kids, and the rest of us can be happy for what you've done. And we can build a new Jerusalem. Let's go pave them streets with gold, right? What do you say? Let's do it. All right, guys. You guys take care out there. Stay safe. Till next time. Bye.